John 12:20-33. Some Greeks were among those who had come up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and made a request. "Sir, we want to see Jesus." Philip told Andrew, and Andrew and Philip told Jesus. Jesus replied, "The time has come for the human one to be glorified. I assure you that unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it can only be a single seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their lives will lose them, and those who hate their lives in this world will keep them forever. Whoever serves me must follow me. Wherever I am, there my servant will also be. My Father will honor whoever serves me. Now I am deeply troubled. What should I say? Father, save me from this time? No, for this is the reason I have come to this time. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven, "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." The crowd standing there heard, and said, "It's thunder." Others said, "An angel spoke to him." Jesus replied, "This voice wasn't for my benefit, but for yours. Now is the time for judgment of this world. Now this world's ruler will be thrown out. When I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to me." He said this to show how he was going to die.
Hello again, Methodist friends. I'm Pastor Laurie Bayen from Windsor Community United Methodist Church, and it is good again to be with you here in this digital format to share the word with you today. Would you join me in prayer? May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, Lord, for you are our strength and our salvation. Amen. Some of you have heard me say this before about how Jesus is portrayed in the Gospel of John. He continually seems to be at least 2 steps ahead of everyone around him. From the very beginning and all through the book, Jesus knows clearly what his mission is, but everyone else around him is slow to get it. Nearly every encounter Jesus has with others is an illustration of the assertion from the prologue in chapter 1. The light, that is, Jesus, came to his own people, but they didn't recognize him. Almost no one gets it. This didn't seem to faze him or distract him, though. Jesus stayed on course. He knew, again as John's prologue stated, that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot extinguish it. Jesus soldiers on, and from time to time, someone does get it. Whether they do or not does not deter Jesus from his mission. He goes right on, being who he is without apology, like a candle that burns brighter and brighter, trusting that others will be illumined eventually and join in the light-bearing. Now, because of this single-mindedness of Jesus' approach in John, I'm struck over and over by how often in that gospel Jesus' statements seem not to be directly answering the demands or questions that are put to him. We see that again in this passage, and more than once. Some Greeks asked to see Jesus, and Jesus speaks not to those visitors, but to his disciples and the crowd about death and service. A voice sounds from heaven, and those who hear it can't agree what it was, and Jesus doesn't address that confusion, but instead talks of his death being lifted up, throwing out the ruler of this world, and judgment. Both times he says, "Now is the time has come." We might contrast that to one of the earliest scenes in John's Gospel when Jesus turns water into wine at a wedding in Cana, and Jesus tells his mother, "My time is not yet come." These don't seem to be direct answers to the requests and questions posed by the people in these stories. Now remember, the passage today comes from the events of Holy Week. Crowds have gathered in Jerusalem for the Passover, and Jesus is among them. Sometime before, Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead, causing the understandable stir that had the chief priests in a tizzy. They had issued a warrant for Jesus' arrest. Still, Jesus came to Jerusalem and made a splash. That's the story we'll be remembering next week on Palm Sunday. The air must be charged with expectancy as all wonder what will go down next. And even though they don't yet understand, Jesus declares, now is the time. It is not what this crowd is expecting or hoping for, but now is the time. Death and resurrection, a face-to-face with the forces of evil. It will not be a peaceful transition, but one requiring courage in the face of violence and suffering. In the end, there really is a response to the Greeks' query, we want to see Jesus. It just might not look like it at first. In John's indirect style, laden with metaphors about light and non-light, goodness and evil, seeing and blindness, the answer is, if you want to see Jesus, you have to embrace death along with resurrection. You have to embrace service and suffering and self-sacrifice. You have to follow Jesus as he goes to the cross. I was touched this week by the comments made in our Lenten devotional book by the Reverend T. Denise Anderson, in which she writes briefly about pastoring a church through dissolution. You'll find her reflection on page 32 of the booklet. I was touched because I've been through the same sobering task myself. I was also touched because of the paragraph 213 assessment work, which I mentioned a couple weeks back, that Pastor Lindsay and I are doing, along with some others, for one of our sister congregations. I was touched by Reverend Anderson's words. We realized that change would happen either with us or to us. I see Jesus among the crowds of Jerusalem on Holy Week, presenting the choice. Do you want to see me? Do you want to see the light? Then you're going to have to go with me. You're going to have to give up resistance to what will be difficult. Be an active, faithful part of the change instead of a victim of it. You're going to have to embrace the light and go into the darkness, as painful as that might be, and accept the consequences instead of running away and avoiding them. This is how we see Jesus, by going to the places that are dark, shining light on suffering, taking a hard look at what is diseased and deformed in our communities and in ourselves, and following Jesus bravely in the face of those realities. I'd like to repeat Reverend Anderson's comment and its continuation. We realized that change would happen either with us or to us. We could die to some things so that we could live to others, or we could hold on to what is and die with it. Only one of these is a faithful way forward. Now Jesus assures us that death is not ultimately something to be afraid of. Death does not have the final word. Change may look scary. Having the light shone on our lives in stark relief may feel scary. The reaction of those who resist the light may scare us too. But violence and death do not have the final word. I think it behooves us, as people of faith, to ask, What needs to die in our society? What needs to die in me? A final word as we are nearing the end of Lent. Holy Week, as you know, begins next Sunday. Last March, one of our Windsor church folks shared a quip she'd heard. "This is the lentiest Lent ever lented." And it certainly did feel that way then. This Lent, however, has come to us with additional challenges, not the least of which has been a deep weariness from months of isolation, loss, and the stretching of our coping strategies. So a season for self-reflection has been particularly hard. It would not surprise me to learn that some faithful folks found themselves too weary to engage fully in Lent this year. This past week, I received via email a lovely Lenten meditation for pastors, courtesy of my seminary. The author of this particular devotional recalled a sermon preached by Pope Francis way back in 2015, in which he identified 3 sources of weariness among pastors. First, the pressure of the crowds, that is, being in public ministry, which often is what I call good tired. Second, the badgering of enemies, that is, the persistence of evil and injustice, and the voices of temptation and self-doubt. And third, the weariness of oneself, which comes when one forgets that this work is a labor of love. To this threefold weariness, Pope Francis said, "Only love gives true rest." His words are no less true today. The purpose of this work, I am reminded, is love. Loving myself, loving God, and loving my community. My desire to see a better world, to see love in action, to see Jesus. For my sake, for the sake of my neighbors, for the sake of my children and generations to follow. Again and again, we are reformed by love. Love is not always easy, but love brings rest and overcomes death. So may we let love and light be our guide, wherever they may lead. Amen.